Okay, so we are going to dive into basically the first meeting between, not the first meeting, but the first real conversation that Montag gets to have with his mentor, Faber. So let's go ahead and I'm going to show you sort of the starter discussion question for today. Okay. So there's going to be a lot of different stuff that we're going through with this one, but I really wanted to start with this particular quote by Viktor Frankl. It's one of my favorite ones, but it's also going to help us understand kind of like the way time is broken up in this next scene, because time is a massive motif in this book, but many, many times when we read this, like Fahrenheit 451, we kind of focus on the books themselves, which are really important. But there's an aspect to the books themselves that is interesting in the way that it shows up in this next section. So we're gonna dive into that. So the quote is, between stimulus and response, there is a space, and that space is our power to choose a response. In our response lies our growth and our big emphasis on that word freedom, right? So freedom to basically frame this in a certain way and to ask ourselves deeper questions if we want to. And I love what Faber is going to talk to us about when it comes to it's not the books, it's the ideas in the books. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my little guy here. All right. So you'll see that I already have a couple of things that I've pulled out that I want to make sure that I cover in this one. Um, One of the things that Faber talks about is the idea of growing on good rain and black loam, as opposed to sort of like the pretty ideas that are simple and clean, that you don't have to ask a lot of questions of. And then we're going to talk about the idea of like time and a little bit of color theory. We'll get a little tiny bit into color theory, but I really like to save color theory for Gatsby because it's that to me is so much better, philosophically speaking. And then we'll talk a little bit about like the salamander devouring his tail and Kronos versus Kairos. So lots of preamble, but let's just I wanted to show you guys. You know what? Actually, let's go ahead and just do the reading first. Okay. Okay, so we're starting at the bottom of page 76. Who is it? Montag out here. What do you want? Let me in. I haven't done anything. Ugh, I'm alone, damn it. You swear it? I swear. The front door opened slowly. Faber peered out, looking very old in the light, and very fragile, and very much afraid. The old man looked as if he had not been out of the house in years. He had white plaster walls inside, and they were very much the same. There was white in the flesh of his mouth, and his cheeks, and his hair was white, and his eyes had faded, with white in the vague blueness there. Then his eyes touched on the book under Montag's arm, and he did not
Okay.
look so old any more, and not quite as fragile. Slowly, his fear went. I'm sorry. Okay, so let me pause it really quickly. And I realized that I have two windows open, so I'm going to close one of these windows so that I don't confuse myself. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about color theory, because we hear just the way that Clarice was described as being associated with the pale moon. Now we're hearing that Beatty, listen to me, Faber is being associated with the color white. Okay. So when we think about the idea of understanding the world around us, the sense that we use the most of the five senses. The sense that we use the most in order to understand the world around us is our sense of sight, right? And the way that we understand how color works is that color is kind of like a prism, okay? If we are looking at light directly, just like staring it in the face, it is going to be white. That is the color of all of the colors combined, is white light, right? And then the absence of that is black or darkness, okay? We just heard Faber, the teacher, being described as white, white, white. His house is white and he is white, and like, it's like his vibe is just like white. But that whiteness is supposed to be kind of the bright whiteness of enlightenment. So when we hear the idea, and we talked a little bit about this last time, when we hear the idea of enlightenment being this like moment of epiphany in which you step out into the world and you're like, everything that I thought was true isn't true. That's what Montag has already found out, but he did it in a soft way through Clarice. Clarice wasn't bright white light. She was soft moonlight. She was a candle that was like a memory that he had when he was a little boy, in which all of the lights went out and he was there with his mother. And it was this very soft white light of a candle, like the soft pale glow of a candle. But now we have Faber. And Faber is not soft. Faber is the bright white light of enlightenment. And that can feel like blinding and overwhelming. This isn't a soft candle. And so we're about to hear some truths that Faber is going to spill. And those truths can be associated with the idea of nihilism, and he doesn't stick with it, so don't worry. But nihilism is this concept of just like we can't change anything, and therefore we have to accept the absurdity of life. And that enlightenment is a stark, dramatic decision that Faber has taken. So when we hear what Faber starts to spill, a lot of us are going to be like, oh, I don't know if I agree with that. But in your response, you're actually proving Faber's point, because Faber basically says that we have a space between when we're reading something and our reaction to it, and you can choose to accept that or not. And that space isn't necessarily there when it comes to television, right? So if we're looking at a video game or TVs or movies or something like that, we don't get the space to interpret and to beat back. So when you hear these arguments that Faber is going to make, whether you agree with them or not, is actually proving the point. And that's Bradbury's point, right? The difference between books and movies and video games is that books allow you to go, I'm going to take a breath and I'm going to decide to believe in this or not to believe in this. That's your power and your freedom. One has to be careful. He looked the book under Montag's arm and could not stop. So it's true? Montag stepped inside. The door shut. Sit down. Faber backed up, as if he feared the book might vanish if he took his eyes from it. Behind him, the door to the bedroom stood open, and in that room, a litter of machinery and steel tools were strewn upon the desktop. Montag had only a glimpse before Faber, seeing Montag's attention diverted, turned quickly and shut the bedroom door and stood holding the knob with a trembling hand. His gaze returned unsteadily to Montag, who was now seated with the book in his lap. The book. Where did you... I stole it. Faber for the first time raised his eyes and looked directly into Montag's face. You're brave. No, said Montag. My wife's dying. A friend of mine's already dead. Someone who may have been a friend was burnt less than 24 hours ago. You're the only one I knew might help me. To see. Faber's hands itched on his knees. May I? Oh, sorry. Montag gave him the book. It's been a long time. I'm not a religious man, but it's been a long time. Faber turned the pages, stopping here and there to read. It's as good as I remember. Lord, how they've changed it in the parlors these days. Christ is one of the family now. I often wonder if God recognizes his own son the way we've dressed him up, or has it dressed him down? Okay, so before we kind of get into this, we hear this moment in which Faber, even though all the stuff he's about to say about the books is like the books aren't the point, he's having a moment of awe with a book. And if we think about the idea of one of the things that books are and have always been is something tangible. So whereas if you're sitting and watching TV or scrolling social media, you're just receiving, something about the tangible smell and feel of books can take you to a different experience, right? And it's an experience that you can either choose to accept or reject depending on your focus, but it is something that's kind of special. And so I wanted to show you guys this really quick little clip, which I love. And it's I love John and Hank Green, but like it's just this basic, the two of them going back and forth, and he's talking about this beautiful book. So take a look at the illuminated letters that we're going to see in this, because this is when we think about beauty in books, this is a great example.
Good morning, John. I am currently standing outside of the old library at Trinity College Dublin, where I was recently giving a talk. A regular library is over there, but that's the old library. the one with the very long room and all the very old books, including the second most important book in all of Dublin, the Book of Kells, which was transcribed as several Gospels of the Bible, illustrated and illuminated by unknown artists who created one of the masterworks of humanity. It's
So really quickly, just because this is like a fun little aside. So when he says the word illuminated, what he means, hang on, we're at 29. What he means by the word illuminated, let me show you. All of this beautiful artwork that you see was done in the retranscription, meaning that someone went back to the original story and rewrote the story, but every time they rewrite it, they make it a little bit more fanciful and beautiful. So these books are hand transcribed. Like these books are handwritten and hand drawn and all of those things. And so every time they're like doing this, they're adding more and more beautiful art. And so illumination isn't just the idea of you illuminate the room with a light bulb. You also illuminate a book with art, which I think is such a beautiful metaphor. Sorry, I can't pass a good metaphor, you know? Okay, so let's keep going.
Off in a Viking raid. It was tossed into a bog where it was for 3 months before it was recovered, and somehow it has survived all of these years, and you can go and see it if you're ever in Dublin. But of course, number one, I also recently went to
Okay, so he's going to do a little plug for the book thing. But anyway, but yeah, so when it comes to the idea of the, Faber has this moment in which he's like gazing at this beautiful Bible and he's like smelling it and experiencing it. That is definitely part of the experience of having a book in your hands, right? And so the idea of the idea of the ideas, but the idea of these philosophies being contained within these books, and Montag understands that like I can't hold on to them in my memory because I can't memorize them because my brain's like a sieve, right? And all the sand is flowing through. And now I have a teacher who could potentially help me with this, but my teacher's really bitter. My teacher's really nihilistic. This is a great way for him to have a moment of awe that might pull him out of that nihilism just a little bit. He's a regular peppermint stick now, all sugar crystal and saccharin, when he isn't making veiled references to certain commercial products that every worshiper absolutely needs. Faber sniffed the book. Do you know that books smell like nutmeg or some spice from a foreign land? I love to smell them. And when I was a boy, Lord, there were a lot of lovely books once before we let them go. Faber turned the pages. Mr. Montag, you are looking at a coward. I saw the way things were going a long time back, and I said nothing. I'm one of the innocents who could have spoken up and out when no one would listen to the guilty. But I did not speak, and thus became guilty myself. And when finally they set the structure to burn the books using the firemen, I grunted a few times and subsided, for there were no others grunting or yelling with me by then. Now, it's too late. Faber closed the Bible. Well, suppose you tell me why you came here. Nobody listens anymore. And I can't talk to the walls because they're yelling at me. I can't talk to my wife and she listens to the walls. I just want someone to hear what I have to say, and maybe if I talk long enough, it'll make sense. And I want you to teach me to understand what I need. Faber examined Montag's thin, blue-jowled face. How did you get shaken up? What knocked the torch out of your hands? I, I don't know. We have everything we need to be happy, but we aren't happy. Something's missing. I looked around, and the only thing I positively knew was gone was the books I'd burned in 10 or 12 years. And so I thought books might help. You're a hopeless romantic, said Faber. It would be funny if it were not so serious. It's not books you need. It's some of the things that were once in the books. The same things could be in the parlor families today. The same infinite detail and awareness could be projected through radios and televisors, but are not. I know. No, it's not the books you're looking for. Take it where you can find it, in old phonograph records, old motion pictures, and old friends. look for it in nature and look for it in yourself. I mean, books were only one type of receptacle where we stored a lot of things we were afraid we might forget. There's nothing magical in them at all. The magic is only in what books say, how they stitched the patches of the universe together into one garment for us. So, of course, you couldn't know this. Of course, you still can't understand what I mean when I say all this. You're intuitively right. That's what counts. Three things are missing. Number one, do you know why books such as this are so important? It's because they have quality. And what does that word quality mean? It means, to me, texture. This book has pores, it has features. This book can go under the microscope. You'd find life under the glass, streaming past an infinite profusion. The more pores, the more truthfully recorded details of life per square inch you can get on a sheet of paper, the more literary you are. I mean, that's my definition anyway. Telling detail, fresh detail. The good writers touch life often. The mediocre ones run a quick hand over her, and the bad ones rape her and leave her for the flies. So now do you see why books are hated and feared? They show the pores in the face of life. The comfortable people want only wax moon faces, poreless, hairless, expressionless. We are living in a time when flowers are trying to live on flowers instead of growing on good rain and black loam. Woo! So that kind of goes to the heart of Beatty's argument. So remember Beatty when he said, and he was justifying the idea of burning the house down to the woman, he said none of those men agree with each other, right? None of them agree with each other. And that's kind of what's cool, but also frustrating about books and information and knowledge, and that is that there isn't an answer. Like when you get into that slippery stuff of sociology and philosophy, it doesn't say, oh, here's the meaning of life, right? Or, here's what it means to be moral, or like, here's what you do with ethics, and like, here's how you, there is no how to for this. When it comes to understanding what life and humanity and purpose and all of that sticky stuff of philosophy and sociology, it doesn't make it easy on you. And basically, what Faber is arguing here, and we talked about Heraclitus in a couple of classes ago, is the fact that when you are learning something and you put it down on paper, it becomes the stream of knowledge, and you can never step into the same stream twice. So if you read one philosopher that says the meaning of life is this, right, and then another philosopher that says, like, that's where we get nihilism, there is no meaning, right? When it comes to meaning, and Viktor Frankl, you have to make your own meaning through your perspective. All of those things are true. And that's hard. What do you mean I can't give it either this is true or that's true, right? The horror of indeterminacy is what learning is. And it is the space between stimulus, book, theory, idea. The TV shows, if they were good, but Faber basically says that they're not. They had the option to be good and thought provoking and all of those things, and they're not, right? There is a space between your consumption of that and a moment in which you get to have a conversation with it. And that's kind of the beauty of what reading is, and especially when it comes to books, because you're a bigger part of the conversation than if you were just receiving something through a television. You get to interpret it. And not only do you get to interpret the book in your way, you get to look at the way that you interpret the book. If you see a particular character as being one way, why did you think that immediately? Why was that your first response? And isn't that also interesting? And what does that say about the things that you know in this world around us? But that is going to take, and this is what Faber's going to get into next as soon as I stop talking, that is going to take a deeper analysis, one that our character here, Montag, is not yet capable of, and he knows that. And so he is at least self-aware enough to know that he does need to go seek out a teacher. And that's why he has come to Faber to basically teach him the things that he needs to know. Right. And so as he's talking to Faber, the first thing that Faber points out is that, old phonograph records, old songs, old, things that you can read, all of those things, all of those hold those old ideas, but it isn't necessarily the physical book itself, even though the physical books themselves also do something magical, right? They smell a certain way and they feel a certain way and they look illuminated, right? That's part of the process. But it's not just that, right? If we were confronted with the parlor walls in which, and he talks specifically about Jesus because they're looking at an illuminated Bible in which that discussion took place on the parlor walls, well, then maybe there would be some hope. But remember, Faber is an old he's an old teacher. He's an English teacher. Maybe that's why I'm like trying to protect him. I don't know. But he says I'm a coward. He says I didn't speak up when I had the chance to, and instead I just let the whole thing burn. Even fireworks, for all their prettiness, come from the chemistry of the earth, and yet somehow we think we can grow feeding on flowers and fireworks without completing the cycle back to reality. Do you know the legend of Hercules and Antaeus, the giant wrestler, whose strength was incredible so long as he stood firmly on the earth? But when he was held rootless in mid-air by Hercules, he perished easily. If there isn't something in that legend for us today in this city in our time, then I'm completely insane. Well, there we have the first thing. Quality, texture of information. And the second, leisure. Oh, I mean, we've got plenty of off hours. Off hours. Yeah. Okay, so this is really fun for me because I love the time stuff. And maybe that's because my ADHD is like, time? What is that? Weird. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys a couple of things, but before I do, I'm going to plant a little seed for you. So when we talk about the idea of time, there is a way that Greeks used to separate time, which I think is going to be very valuable for this discussion. So the Greeks believed in Chronos versus Kairos. Chronos is like what it sounds like, right? It's the Greek Titan, but also the idea of chronological time. Chronological time just means first this, then this, then this, then this, right? First, April, then May, then June, then July. First 1 o'clock, then 2 o'clock, then 3 o'clock, then 4 o'clock. Second to second, you can, infinitesimally divide it down, but it's first, 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 right? And if right now you're like, well, okay, yeah, that's how time works. But remember, time is still a perception. The way that we understand the passing of time, and Hume points this out, David Hume, if you have one thing, you can't automatically assume that the next thing is going to occur, right? That's a logical fallacy. When we talk about the idea of time, if we are doing something and our brain is in a flow state, we talk about an ADHD hyperfocus, time it goes away, right? Athletes experience this, multiple times when they're working out. Like as a long distance runner, there are moments in my run in which I could have been running for, 30 minutes. I could have been running for 4 hours and not know. There is a moment in which our brains can disconnect from the chronology of time. And most of those moments are going to be moments in which the Greeks would call kairos. Kairos is hang on, sorry, shush my timer. Kairos, and actually, that's actually kind of perfect. So when I'm doing this stuff and I'm creating and I'm in the state of like hyper focus and flow, I actually have to set a timer. I'll show you. So I actually have to set a timer for myself because I will get so sucked into this that I won't allow myself to recognize outside time. And so because I have deadlines and classes and things that I have to do, I set a specific timer for my Kairos time because Kairos time for the Greeks is the time of creativity. It's the philosophical hour, right? It is the moment in which you are creating and flowing and thinking and digesting and understanding the world around you and reflecting and philosophizing and connecting with the world and regrounding yourself, but also like doing this deep philosophical work of like, what does it mean to be a human, and am I moral, and am I being good, or does morality even matter, and like what does it mean to be selfish, and like all of those big deep philosophical questions happen in Kairos time. And Kairos time is supposed to be non-productive. So Kairos time could be you playing with your model train set for 4 hours and your parents knock on the door and they go, hey, you've been playing your model train set for 4 hours. You want to come up and take a breath? And you go, oh yeah. Right. And then you go do your homework, or you go, eat dinner with your family, or you go do whatever. But that circling of hyper focus where you are like unaware of the world around you, like that's massive. And it's so very, very important. Right. And in the world in which Fahrenheit 451 takes place, that is a big fear for them. Not a big fear for them. It's a big fear for Faber, is that it's been so stripped away, right? And in this world, it's largely been stripped away through distraction, right? So we talked earlier about the idea of the 1984 versus the Brave New World, right? And so, one of the things about Brave New World was basically like you're being entertained to death. And that's kind of what's happening here. There is no leisure time for these people because they're being entertained to death, right? 1984, it was like you have to work. You have to work, 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 right? And so that's not emphasized as much in this particular part, but it was definitely a fear during that time period because I'm going to show you in this. We're just going to do a couple quick little snippets of this. Um, so this is a instructional film of the 1950s, and remember contextually, think about when the book was written and when it was published. So we're just going to watch a little bit of this.
Time. Leisure time. Did you ever stop to think how much leisure time you really have? Some of us put our leisure time to good use. And some of us, Ken Michaels, for example, spend most of our leisure time just moping.
Moping? He thinks I'm moping. Well, who wouldn't mope? There's nothing to do, nobody's around. You know how it is. I went down to the bowling alley, went over to the drugstore. None of the gang was there. All my friends are busy, so what's for me to do?
Do you suppose Ken has more leisure time than his friends do?
Huh? Well, no, I don't have more time. We all spend about the same amount of time in school, and the rest is leisure time. I've got nothing to do but wait for supper. My friends have more things to do. They're lucky.
Ken's pretty lucky, too.
Listen to that. All right, I'll bite. Why am I lucky?
Because you have so much leisure time.
Okay, so I just want to point out that he's eating an apple. Remember what we talked about last time with the idea, the symbolism of the apple and knowledge and all of those things? So he's eating an apple. And then, so basically what happens, I'm just going to summarize this next part because it does go on for a bit. So the narrator chastises poor Ken for daring to lay down on his bed and have a moment to stare up at the ceiling. And he's like, why aren't you doing things? You're moping. And he's like, cool, I just literally sat down. And then the narrator proceeds to explain to Ken he should be more appreciative of his leisure time because back 100 years, back 50 years, back, however many years, his great grandfather would have been working right now and he's not working, right? And his poor mother would also have more work to do, but she doesn't have to because of modern conveniences, right? And so he's basically being yelled at for not being productive in his leisure time. He's just laying in the bed. And then so they show him kind of like walking around, and then they chastise him because right now all of his friends are being productive in their leisure time. So let's take a look at Ken's friends.
Last I saw Dave, he was headed that way.
You mean this way? Yes, Dave has a hobby of identifying birds. It's a pleasant way of spending his time, and besides, it helps him with some of his schoolwork. You can learn quite a bit from hobbies. Here's Bill. Some of his leisure time is spent doing part-time work at the bookstore, along with earning some spending.
Sorry, so some of his leisure time is working? Is that what we're saying here, is that you should take your leisure time and you should work more? Fantastic. Sounds good.
Money, he's getting experience that will help him later on. And Alice is devoting some of her leisure to learning to sew. That's something she'll be glad she did when she's older. And right now, she gets a big kick out of it.
She'll be glad when she's older because she can be productive when she's older, too.
Here's the way Marge spends some of her leisure time. She's learning to play the piano. She's getting a lot of pleasure from her own accomplishment, and she's acquiring a skill that will help her socially. And some of the fellows spend their time in group activities that are building them up physically, as well as providing them with a lot of fun.
So that's what they're all doing. No wonder I couldn't.
None of these things is wrong. All of these things are great leisure activities, and they do help your mental health. In fact, if you don't have one of these things to do, some sort of a hobby or a thing to do, you should probably look into them because they're really, really good for you to force your brain to be like, okay, we're not doing this other thing because we have a set day and time that we're going to go play D&D. Like we have a set day and like that means that I have to force my brain to do this fun thing, like create this D&D character, or I have a set amount of time that I'm going to go, run this 5K with my friends. And so like that's super important and like all of those things. But the framing of this is that your leisure time that you're spending digesting information and understanding and asking, philosophical questions by laying on your bed and eating an apple and staring at the ceiling, that's not equal to the productive aspect. Like each one of those hobbies was mentioned as a way of being productive, right? He was bird watching so that he could be better at school. Part-time work, obviously, so he can make money. She's going to appreciate that later with her sewing, right? All of those different leisure activities, they're doing gym activities so that they can physically be fit. But there is this aspect of productivity, and that means that these deep philosophical conversations aren't equal in their leisure, right? And so when we think about the idea of chronos versus kairos time, this kairos time is part of the other aspect of the quality. So it's not just quality of product. It's not just quality of these, records, or the quality of these books, or the quality even of these like ideas, because he talks about, the concept of, and I always think of like, there's this movie, Get Your Parents' Permission to Watch, called Dogma, in which they talk about the figure of like the buddy Christ, and that is that there has to be texture fit to things, because when things are less easily digestible, when there's pores to things, when things, I always call it like being crunchy, when things are crunchy in our brains, we have to kind of slow down and we have to tool them out, and that requires us to be able to have time to digest these big ideas. Quality ideas take a while to digest, and they may not be as pretty, but they are definitely, fire is bright and fire is clean, right? But they are definitely going to be something that is going to create quality for you, because you're getting yourself into a Kairos state. And in the Fahrenheit 451 society, their Kairos state is gone, purposefully gone, right? And that's one of the other things that Faber is citing. So let's tie back in and make me stop talking. Shush you. But time to think. If you're not driving 100 miles an hour at a clip where you can't think of anything else but the danger, then you're playing some game, or you're sitting in your some room where you can't argue with a four-wall television. Why? Because the television isn't real. It's immediate. It has dimension. It tells you what to think and it blasts it in. It must be right. It seems so right. It rushes you on so quickly to its own conclusions that your mind hasn't time to protest. What nonsense, it might say. Only the family is people. I beg your pardon? My wife says books aren't real. Thank God for that. You can shut them. Hold on a moment, you say. You play God to it. But who has ever torn himself from the claw that encloses you when you drop a seed in a TV parlor? It grows you any shape it wishes. It is environment as real as the world. It becomes and is the truth. Books can be beaten down with reason, but with all my knowledge and skepticism, I have never been able to argue with a 100-piece symphony orchestra, full color, 3 dimensions, and being in and out of those incredible parlors. And you see, my parlor is nothing but 4 plaster walls. And here, he held out 2 small rubber plugs, for my ears when I ride the subway jets. Denham's dentrifice, they toil not, neither do they spin, said Montag, eyes shut. Oh, where do we go from here? What books could help us? Ugh. Only if the third necessary thing could be given us. Number 1, I said, is quality of information. Number 2, leisure to digest it. And number 3, the right to carry out actions based on what we learn from the interaction of the first 2. And I hardly think a very old man and a fireman turned sour could do much this late in the game. I can get books. You're running a risk. That's the good part of dying when you've nothing to lose. You run any risk you want. There. Now you've said an interesting thing, laughed Faver, without having read it. Are things like that in books? But it came off the top of my mind. All the better. You didn't fancy it up for me or anyone, even yourself. Montag leaned forward. This afternoon, I thought that if I turned out the books and they were worthwhile, we might get a press and we might print some extra copies. We? Well, you and I? Oh no, Faber sat up. But let me tell you my plan. If you insist on telling me, I must ask you to leave. But aren't you interested? You? Not if you start talking the sort of talk that might get me burnt for my trouble. The only way I could possibly listen to you would be if somehow the fireman structure itself could be burnt. Now, if you suggest that we print extra books and arrange to have them hidden in firemen's houses all over the country, so just to be clear, because it's I didn't do the voices very well here, we're hearing Faber suggest a subversive act. All right. So he's saying, if you think that we should do this, speaking to Montag, if you think that we should do this, then I might be able to do that. Right. But he's basically telling Montag, I don't know what it is that you think that you can do, but I don't think that we can do anything this late in the game. And that goes to the number three, and that is the ability to fight against what it is that we feel is wrong. So the first thing is the quality, meaning the ideas have to be good, and have to have texture and have to be about humanity. The next thing is the idea of leisure. We need to have the time to be able to digest those ideas. And that in and of itself in the world of Fahrenheit 451 is a rebellious act, because definitely in the 1950s, the idea of productivity was extremely important. And I would argue that that idea is still very much ingrained in us today. I mean, hustle culture is a thing that is definitely part of the majority of cultures now. You work hard, and when you work hard, that means that you are a good person. And if you are a type of person who wants to quote unquote mope around, then that means that you're lazy, and that means that you're unproductive and you're a suck on society and all of those things, right? When in fact, if we want to deeply question the avenues that are going to make our society better, we need time to look at these very deep, poignant ideas, right? And so the third part is the ability to fight. If we see something wrong in the society that these ideas are pointing us to, we need to have the ability to argue against that. Okay. So this is also going to kind of go back to the idea of Plato's allegory of the cave, where you're like, hey, there are people that are still chained down in there. There are people that are still chained to that existence in which they're just naming the things on the wall. Do we have a responsibility to free them, even if they don't want to be freed, like Mildred? So that seeds of suspicion will be sown among the arsonists. Bravo, I'd say. Plant the books, turn in an alarm, and see the firemen's houses burn. Is that what you mean? Faber raised his brows and looked at Montag as if he were seeing a new man. I was joking. If you thought it would be a plan worth trying, I'd have to take your word it would help. Oh, you can't guarantee things like that. After all, when we had all the books we needed, we still insisted on finding the highest cliff to jump off of. But we do need a breather. We do need knowledge. And perhaps in 1,000 years, we might pick smaller cliffs to jump off of. The books are to remind us what asses and fools we are. There's Caesar's Praetorian Guard whispering as the parade roars down the avenue. Remember, Caesar, thou art mortal. Most I love this so much. So the idea of remember, Caesar, thou art mortal. The books are the ideas that we missed. That's what they are. Like we wouldn't, sorry, stepped on my own microphone. We wouldn't have the need to have these books if we had figured it out. But mankind keeps messing it up, right? The Billie Eilish lyric, mankind's so stupid. Why do we keep saving him? It is the moment in which we realize that the reason we keep writing these ideas down over and over again is because we keep getting them wrong. And that's what Faber says, is that, basically books exist to help remind us what asses we are because we keep messing it up. And he says the line about Caesar, remember, Caesar, thou art mortal, meaning that your time on this earth is limited. So if you want to make the world a better place before you die, understand that whatever sweeping, massive movement that you want to do, you could die from it. And so when Montag comes charging into this guy's life and says, I want to make a difference, we have to save these books, I'm suddenly aware of the fact. And he's kind of met with the kind of a mirror version of himself in the future, right? This is Faber, who had the same idea that Montag did ages and ages ago, but he didn't speak up then. Right. And so he feels like there's no point in speaking up now, that it's too late. And so he talks about this subversive plan of basically like burning the firemen's houses down and trying to take the system away with that. Like if we somehow make it so that people start questioning whether or not the firemen are good people, then maybe that's going to bring the whole system down, right? But he also is very scared, and he says, along these lines, like, are you sure that this is what people want? Like, we had access to books ages and ages ago, and yet we still keep flinging ourselves off of these cliffs. We didn't look at them then. What makes you think that we're going to start looking at them now, especially if we have an entire society full of Mildreds? Right? Clarice was the outlier. Clarice's family was the outlier, and so much so that they literally burned up. And so Faber has a valid point. I know right now we kind of want to go after Faber and be like, you're a coward. He says he's a coward. But you know what? He survived up to this point. So he's saying to Montag, like, you need a better plan, because just going in there and being like, we have to save the books, that's not going to work. If you want to be subversive about it, then let's talk about that. But like, your storming the castle isn't going to solve anything. Right? So there's a couple of different lessons that we can hear there. Most of us can't rush around, talk to everyone, know all the cities of the world. We haven't the time or money or that many friends. The things you're looking for, Montag, are in the world. But the only way the average chap will ever see 99% of them is in a book. Don't ask for guarantees, and don't look to be saved in any one thing, person, machine, or even library. Do your own bit of saving, and if you drown, at least die knowing you are headed for the shore. Faber got up and began to pace the room. Well? Asked Montag. You are absolutely serious? Absolutely. Ugh, it's an insidious plan, if I do say so myself. Faber glanced nervously at his bedroom door. To see the firehouses burn across the land, destroyed as hotbeds of treason. The salamander devours his tail. God. I have a list of firemen's residences everywhere. So I know it's a salamander, but doesn't it also kind of sound like serpent, right? And remember, salamanders were supposed to be seen as mythical creatures because they thought that they could eat their, oh, I'm sorry, they thought that they could survive fire, right? And so salamanders are part of the mythos, just like a phoenix that like comes up from the ashes and creates something new and beautiful, right? There is this idea of their perpetual motion of eating its own tail, that this is a cycle that goes throughout infinity, right? And the concept of the system itself eating itself, that's also part of that perpetual system. With some sort of underground, can't trust people. That's the dirty part. You and who else will set the fires? Aren't there professors like yourself, and like former writers, historians, linguists, dead or ancient? The older the better. They'll go unnoticed. You have to know dozens. Admit it. There are actors alone who haven't acted in Pirandello or Shaw or Shakespeare for years because their plays were too aware of the world. We could use their anchor. And we could use honest rage of those historians who haven't written a line for 40 years, true. We might form classes into thinking and reading. Yeah, but that would just nibble the edges. The whole culture shot through, Montag. The skeleton needs melting and reshaping. Good God, it isn't as simple as just picking up a book you laid down a half a century ago. Remember, the firemen are rarely necessary. The public itself stopped reading of its own accord. You firemen provide a circus now and then at which the buildings are set off and the crowds gather for the pretty blaze, but it's a small sideshow indeed, and hardly necessary to keep things in line. So few want to be rebels anymore, and out of those few, most, like myself, scare easily. Can you dance faster than the White Clown? Shout louder than Mr. Gimmick and the Parlor families? If you can, you'll win your way, Montag. So Faber basically says it's too late. He says people are so inundated with entertainment that there's going to be no way for us to capture their attention in order to fight back. Like, even if we wanted to pull all of those people out of the cave, it's impossible, right? Because you can't be more entertaining than the White Clown. You can't outshout Mr. Gimmick. Because of that puppet show that those people crave and they enjoy, there's no way that you can compete against it. So what exactly are you trying to do? You can't save them, Montag, is what Faber is saying. There are so few of us left, and we're all old and tired and cynical. And, whatever it is that you're demanding that we do, it's impossible. This is nihilism. This is Faber saying, we tried, to stop this in our small ways before, but we didn't try hard enough. And because we didn't try hard enough, this is what we're left with. A society that is so completely and totally enthralled with entertainment that it refuses to take a good hard look at itself and say, hey, listen, we are pushing ourselves over these cliffs. We're, driving 150 miles an hour on the highway just to feel something, right? The catharsis that we used to have from learning and knowing things in new and interesting ways, we're getting them through pleasure seeking, right? We're entertaining ourselves to death. And these moments of spirituality in which we have epiphany and we have knowledge seeking, and they are long and slow and difficult and questioning and uncomfortable, and the stream keeps changing, like everyone's disagreeing with each other and there is no clear digestible spoon-fed answer. That type of deep work is impossible in this society. And so Faber's like, stop trying. I don't know what it is that you're suggesting, but it's definitely not something that I can participate in. There's definitely something that not the men that you think that I should, or I should say the men, the people that you think that I should bring along on this journey, it's not possible for them either. In any event, you're a fool. People are having fun. Committing suicide, murdering. A bomber fight had been moving east all the time they talked, and only now did the two men stop and listen, feeling the great jet sound tremble inside themselves. Oh, patience, Montag. Let the war turn off the families. Our civilization, it's flinging itself to pieces. Stand back from the centrifuge. There has to be someone ready when it blows up. What? Men quoting Milton, saying, I remember Sophocles, reminding the survivors that man has his good side too. They'll only gather up their stones and hurl it at each other. Montag, go home. Go to bed. Why waste your final hours racing around your cage, denying you're a squirrel? Then you don't care anymore. I care so much, I'm sick. But you won't help me. Ugh. Good night. Go on, good night. Montag's hands picked up the Bible. He saw what his hands had done, and he looked surprised. Would you like to own this? Trigger warning for my bibliophiles. Brace yourself. Faber said. I'd give my right arm. Montag stood there and waited for the next thing to happen. His hands, by themselves, like two men working together, began to rip the pages from the book. The hands tore the flyleaf, and then the first, and then the second, and then the third page. Idiot, what are you doing? Faber sprang up, as if he had been struck. He fell against Montag. Montag warded him off and let his hands continue. 6 more pages fell to the floor. He picked them up and wadded the paper under Faber's gaze. Oh, don't, said the old man. Who can stop me? I'm a fireman. I can burn you. The old man stood looking at him. You wouldn't. I could, though. The book, don't tear it any more. Faber sank into his chair, his face very white, his mouth trembling. Don't make me feel any more tired. Ugh, what do you want? I told you I need you to teach me. Ugh, all right. Montag put the book down. He began to unwad the crumpled paper and flatten it out as the old man watched tiredly. Faber shook his head as if he were waking up. Montag, do you have any money? Some. $400 or $500. Why? Bring it. I know a man who printed our college paper half a century ago. That was the year I came to class in the start of the new semester and found only one student to sign up for the drama from Asalis and to O'Neill. You see how like a beautiful statue of ice it was melting in the sun? I remember the newspapers dying like huge moths. No one wanted them back. No one missed them. And then, and then the government, seeing how advantageous it was to have people reading only about passionate lips and the fist in the stomach, circled the situation with your fire eaters. So Montag, there's this unemployed printer, and and we might start a few books and wait on the war to break the pattern and give us the push we need. A few bombs and the families in the walls of the houses like harlequin rats will shut up. And in the silence, our stage whisper might carry. They both stood looking at the book on the table. I've tried to remember, said Montag, but hell, it's gone when I turn my head. God, how I want something to say to the captain. He's read enough so that he has all these answers, or, he seems to have. His voice is like butter. I'm afraid he's going to talk me back to the way that I was, only a week ago, pumping a kerosene hose. And I thought, oh God, what fun. The old man nodded. Yeah, those who don't build must burn. It's as old as history and juvenile delinquents. So that's what I am. Okay, so we're going to stop there. So good. Okay, so let's kind of go back a little bit when he is talking about what the plan is now, right? So basically, Montag has convinced Faber that the fight that he sees as, hang on, let me zoom in on my little Faber here. He's wearing boxing gloves. I don't know if you can tell that's what those are. So the fight that he sees here that's impossible, it doesn't matter if it's impossible, right? Montag starts ripping the Bible up to prove a point. And the point is, this still horrifies you. This still bothers you to the point that you see it as something important. And if that is true, then we need to do something with that emotion, all right? When we hear that moment that Faber is waking up, we are also kind of reminded of the idea of him coming out of his own cave of ignorance. And there is a big philosophical discussion about the idea of what is the role of philosophy. And some people say that it should be made for political movement, that like if the philosophy exists, it can't exist in a vacuum. One of the things that they mention is Sophocles. And when it comes to, oh, okay, computer, thank you very much. I know I'm going to renew you. But if we think about the idea of what art and philosophy is supposed to do, some people say it's just supposed to be an observation of what is happening at the time. Other people say that it's supposed to fuel change, that the goal of art and philosophy is not just to be an observer, it is also to be an activist. And so there is a question there. We don't have a clear answer. You're going to feel however it is that you're going to feel about it. But one of the things that Faber was taking as a stance before he met Montag was that I am an observer in this world and I am a coward and I didn't speak up. And now I'm giving myself a chance to actually speak up again. And he says maybe we should do this whole thing where we create books, right? I have a printer friend and we can get him involved. And so he's starting to kind of come on to Montag's idea of maybe there is some movement there. So this is one of the reasons that I love Faber. One of the many reasons is that a good teacher always remembers to learn. And I'll say this here. One of the things that's amazing about this class is that we are diving so deeply into these concepts because we have the time to. And if you want to look at any piece of literature as a political commentary on that time period and just use it to examine that time period, then you can. And you can use it as an observer. But you can also use it as a form of activism. And I think one of the biggest forms of activism that we can do today is to take books like Fahrenheit 451 and use them as a way to rebel. Because the type of deep diving that we're doing in here is impossible in a lot of classrooms, in a lot of places. We have the luxury, the kairos, of taking these big concepts and slowly reading them and slowly drawing them out and slowly having these discussions about them. We're taking weeks to read a single book, when in fact, when I was teaching in public education, we took maybe 6 weeks with this book, 7 weeks, 10 weeks if we got lucky, but usually standardized testing bumped all of that out. And here we are, and we have the luxury of basically reading 7 pages at a time and doing these very, very deep dives. And that's a luxury, but it's also really important because this is where deep critical thinking occurs. This is where deep critical learning occurs. And the more that we try to rush a learning process, the more we lose. And in this moment, Faber, like a good teacher, is learning from his student because, and this is my teaching philosophy that I came up with when I was just a little tiny baby undergrad, um, before I even declared my major as a teacher, because I didn't want to be a teacher at first. Um, a teacher, a teacher must learn to teach. A teacher must continue to learn. A lamp cannot light another lamp without burning its own flame. I've lost it a little bit, but it's something that I truly believe. And when we standardize and we speed up learning, we remove those moments in which real connection occurs, in which we learn from each other, right? And so this moment in which Faber also gets to participate in using philosophy and art as a way to make political movement is something that I am also going through right now, is using my classroom to understand these very deep philosophical notions with you guys. And that is also a little bit of a form of rebellion because in most classrooms everywhere, it's not something that we have the luxury of doing. So thank you for helping me learn as well. All right, so I'm going to stop it there. I'll be posting all of this stuff, and I hope you enjoyed today.